Hello and welcome to Travel Leaders Podcast. I'm Caroline Bremner, Head of Travel Research at Euromonitor International. I'm delighted to be joined by Liz Ortiguera, Chief Executive Officer of the Pacific Asia Travel Association, PATA. Hi Liz, how are you today?
Oh, good afternoon, good morning. How are you?
I'm really well. I hear you've got a big trip ahead of you, so thank you for taking the time to speak to us today.
Oh, I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
So for today, it would be great to hear a little bit about the COVID recovery. So there are different speeds of recovery around the world. We're seeing some regions like the Caribbean and Europe moving faster, rolling back on restrictions and, allowing vaccinated as well as unvaccinated travellers into their countries. But some countries are remaining very cautious and are taking a zero COVID policy, just like we're seeing in China. Whereas others, like in the UK, where I am, are completely free to travel again. So, how are things looking in Asia Pacific in terms of the recovery?
Well, first of all, in the world of Omicron versus travel, it's been a period of mixed messages and cautious optimism. A spate of markets across Asia Pacific announced their imminent easing of travel restrictions, in the past 1 to 2 months, and border requirements, each to different degrees and specifics. Here in Asia Pacific, I'd still call it a mode of cautious optimism. Certainly we're watching avidly with concern, what's happening in mainland China and Hong Kong. But, there is some, I'll say, exuberance and certainly relief in terms of the markets opening across ASEAN in particular and Australia and New Zealand. And I'd say that, it's still in the early stages of recovery. Capacity for flights is at about 30%. Certainly, there's a lot of pent-up demand, particularly to the destinations that are familiar and known by travelers. But we are seeing, the start of a recovery in many parts of the region while we're waiting for some others to open up. So I'd say it's still uneven and it's still early days.
And that's great to hear that there's lots of pent up demand. And one of the challenges that we're seeing here in the UK, for example, over the Easter break, there was just so many capacity challenges at, key hubs like Heathrow, and the airlines and the airport itself weren't able to deal with the demand. Are you seeing that sort of play out as well in Asia, or is it still too early?
I'd say from the, even in the limited discussions I've had with friends, consumers, it is navigating capacity that's available for flying, and as well as access to favorite resorts. So yes, I'm certainly seeing that, and I do think that there are a number of factors in play in our industry right now with the rising prices, certainly routes getting changed and also limited. But I think that travelers are just anxious to get back, seeing their friends and relatives and taking their holidays.
I mean, the what you're mentioning about inflation and the rising prices of oil, energy, and food, we've that's also been sort of stoked and sort of exacerbated by the situation in Ukraine. And when we looked at the numbers about the potential impact of the Ukraine war on global tourism, it was amounting to $7 billion this year. Are you also seeing sort of the knock-on effects of war in Ukraine in Asia?
I think it's certainly having an impact in terms of, like we were discussing, flight capacity.
Mm.
So that is a concern. And certainly, with China still closed up, a number of destinations, counted Russian travelers at the top of their list in terms of source markets.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think right now it is a matter of, determining, where these destinations that are open can best market and use their dollars to attract travelers with the least path of resistance in
Mm.
coming in.
And do you see certain bright spots across the region? I know, for example, we're seeing sort of social sentiment, and people. Olivier was talking a bit about the social sentiment aspect and people dreaming of Thailand. Do you see certain countries as sort of beacons of hope and light in the region?
Well, I'd say that, two of the markets that were, um, early bright spots in Asia Pacific, of course, counted Maldives and Hawaii. And I think that, there's some best practices that have been observed from market to market that have, managed to find opportunity despite the obstacles that have arisen. Certainly among the different destinations, there's been avid development of secondary and tertiary destinations for both MICE and leisure travel. So, for example, Indonesia, while uh, the reopening of Bali was anxiously awaited, there are 5 other destinations that they would love to communicate and have travelers visit. And that's the same whether it's on the corporate side or the leisure side. I think that it supports the consumer interest in more nature-based, less congested destinations, and disperses the economic benefits more broadly across communities. So you're going to see a number of destinations across Asia Pacific doing that.
That's fascinating. That obviously the big concern for these iconic destinations like Bali is, going back and reverting to over tourism, and of course that was never the best tourism model, was it? And now there is this chance to reset. So very interesting to hear about the development of secondary and tertiary destinations, and just very exciting that there are new places on the map to explore. So it's great to see, and of course, I mean, best practice as well in terms of over tourism, but best practice in terms of safe and seamless and contactless. Have you seen an acceleration of, say, sort of digital health passes, or do you feel it's still just more about health and safety management?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I did a big trip in Q4 where I went through 6 countries, about 10 cities. Um, but I would say that, and I'm about to get on the road again, but here in the region, I'd say that there has been a lot of conservatism around health and safety practices, which is good. There's been uh, a high focus by all of the governments on getting their local communities and particularly their travel frontliners vaccinated in order to ready the market for travelers. And that's been a really a good concerted effort. There's been deployment, as soon as they can get access to vaccines, there has been deployment. There are still some pockets that really need access, but that is like, foundational. And certainly I've found that, the travels in Asia Pacific, there's been, in some ways more conservatism than in the Western markets. And I think, part of that is because they dealt with SARS, years back, and they had some experience on that. And I think that, but all of this, it bodes well. The cases in a number of countries, including particularly here in Singapore, where I am, have been managed aggressively and kept low. And I think this is a really good foundation for both the community and for the incoming travelers. Even though there's still uncertainty out there about, there are a lot of cases, of course, in every country currently. And so do think it's important to stay vigilant. And I personally, I'm going to advocate for mask wearing in crowded and high traffic areas. And, that can be when you're in a busy shopping street, whether you're at home or in, the country you're visiting, or when you're, traveling through the airport terminal and you're in security lines and things like that. So I think it is still important to wear a mask properly and wear a good one. Um, and, this just manages the risk not just for yourself, but also for for the, the people around you.
I mean, that's the whole question of mass vaccinations and vaccine equity is an area that has been highlighted as a drag on recovery post pandemic. And I know that this is a topic that's very close to your heart at PATA. So, what are you doing to ensure that there is a safe and fair distribution of vaccines, that we don't have a case of the have and have nots and a sort of two-tiered recovery? Just wondered, what PATA is doing to work with governments in terms of initiatives on the vaccine front.
Thank you so much for asking about this, because I know that, in Western nations, it's easy to forget that, there are still parts of the world that forget about boosters, they can't even still get a first vaccine or a second vaccine. And I think that's important for all of us to remember, for the welfare uh, of everyone globally, not just for those underprivileged nations and destinations. So as PATA, we started with sharing the best practices of institutes like UNICEF, who are delivering the vaccines to many of the less developed countries and to remote areas. And they have some great case examples and lessons on vaccine education and addressing hesitancy. Then in December, we partnered with Virgin Atlantic and Collinson to support WHO Foundation's Go Give One campaign. So 3 billion people to date still haven't had their first vaccine. So that's something important to remember. And I was really, sad to hear that in some cases, these are even frontliners. Frontline medical workers are still not vaccinated. Travel industry people, of all people, tend to have seen the world and know that disparity exists across countries. So we have a renewed push recently for fundraising. And just last week, I met with the Collinson and the WHO Foundation team and had some great updates. We know that Meta and DFS, Duty Free Shops, have joined our initiative. Duty Free Shops will be prompting consumers to, if they want to donate a vaccine along with their purchase. And we have also an exciting concept around a pop-up stand booth that will be put in a number of airport locations. So while travelers are waiting to catch their flight, they can have a look and donate some vaccines. And like I mentioned, certainly those of us who have the privilege of traveling around the world, we would be the most aware of the needs that exist country to country. And so it is an important time to not forget this and continue with the push.
Yeah, I was reading that this Our World in Data was saying that only about 16% of emerging and developing countries had their vaccine. And, that compares to the Western world, where some countries it's over sort of 80-90%. So they've actually achieved herd immunity. I was just wondering, sort of from previous conversations, you mentioned the price of a vaccine. It's very, very low as well, isn't it?
Well, I know that it can vary, but with the Go Give One campaign, yes, the price is $5 per shot per vaccine.
So it's just a drop in the ocean, isn't it?
It is, and I think that it is. While I think most consumers or individuals may look at the vaccine equity issue as big and daunting, you can make a difference with even just $5. Imagine, you could be saving a life with $5, $10. And the fact that, we know in the privileged world that we have a need for boosters, and I think this concept of herd immunity is also a bit of a fallacy, since, you can have protection against one variant, but not the subsequent ones. But what we do know is with vaccines, having a vaccine means that you will get a less severe form. So it doesn't mean you'll get protected completely, but your chance of getting severely ill will be certainly diminished. And people deserve that as an opportunity globally, right?
Oh,
And
definitely.
probably the other factor too is that the more we can manage down the spread of cases, um, the less chance that dangerous variants will emerge.
That's the thing. So looking at what's happening in the UK, the travel bans and restrictions have gone. We've got complete freedom of movement. You don't need to wear a face mask. So it does feel like we've moved very much from, the pandemic into the endemic, living with the virus. But as you say, that's not to say that the disease isn't still around and the variants are, we know that there's already been a subvariant of Omicron. So, you know, it is something to always be watchful for, isn't it? Now it's like this is the new normal, and it's really sort of inspiring that PATA is tackling the challenge head on with its "Go Give One Free." That's fantastic. What else can consumers and businesses do? Do you think it's also just a case of awareness, driving awareness, but also encouraging consumers to be more questioning of the brands that they work with?
Well, I think the travel businesses, first, let's acknowledge that the travel industry has already supported the humanitarian effort in so many ways from, from the beginning, from the staffing of field hospitals to converting MICE venues and even tour buses to vaccine centers, to the use of hotels as quarantine facilities. All of this has supported the effort. And I want to acknowledge all of those, um, travel staff that have, taken that up and, pivoted into supporting um, travelers and their communities in a time of crisis. So I think that should be appreciated and acknowledged. Just as we all very much appreciate the frontline healthcare workers. Um, so in addition, I think that since the travel sector touches so many different industries, there are ways that industries can help either through A, awareness campaigns for vaccine equity, B, leveraging platforms for education. If you have a channel where you can communicate to people about the needs, that's important. C, you can run a consumer-based micro donation campaign, just like DFS is doing. And then D is corporate giving campaigns. If you have um, a fund, from your corporation or a foundation, certainly consider vaccine equity as an important campaign to donate to.
Hmm. And I mean, just in terms of this, it also seems vaccine equity sort of segues and leads also into the sort of social element of sustainability, doesn't it? So it's also part and parcel of the sustainability efforts that we're seeing that are really accelerating as well. So it's just another nice pillar, isn't it, in your sustainable, uh, tourism transformation. And just on that subject, how is sustainability viewed in Asia Pacific? Is it a nice to have or is it an essential?
Oh, actually, recent surveys, and I've seen this from multiple surveys, have shown that the consumers post-pandemic have a heightened social consciousness around wanting to do healthy travel and wanting to support healthy forms of travel. And thank you for linking, vaccine equity to sustainability because it is a kind of a form of equity and inclusion. And one important aspect of travel is that the right type of travel is an amazing force for good. In particularly here in Asia Pacific, it has been an engine for jobs creation, pre-pandemic. It really has, 1 in 10 jobs is related to travel and tourism. And and certainly, the best kind of travel is one that is very inclusive and um, benefits the broader local economy. So making sure that those micro businesses, those small businesses that have um, been spawned by travel can get back on their feet, post pandemic, and again be an engine for improved improve livelihoods and welfare for the most impacted, the lowest income segment of the population. And most often, that lower income segment is more populated with women. 60% of the workers in travel and tourism are women in this region. And many times they tend to be the lower income and the small micro businesses.
And do you have, I know it's very difficult to ask you this question because you work with so many amazing members, but do you have any sort of examples of best practice across your membership that you use when you're, going out and promoting sustainability?
Oh gosh, and there's so many. There really are, from different aspects. And I think that's one thing that amazes me about the PATA network. I've been in this role, since just June of last year, and the amount of work that's being done by different types of consultants or universities or development agencies in the realm of sustainability is, many of these people have been doing it for 20, 30 plus years. um, it's great to see the momentum that's being driven. And I'll name, one. This is kind of um, my heartfelt favorite is, even before PATA, I was working with a charity hotel restaurant school in Cambodia. That's a nonprofit run by a French organization. And over the past 20 years, they've been educating the poorest of the poor from villages surrounding, Siem Reap. And within 11 months, they can take them from the poorest living conditions with little to no education. And within 11 months, they can be working in a 4 and 5 star hotel, that we partner with. And, I think that's such it's called Salabai in Siem Reap. And to me, that's like the most efficient, effective model that I've seen in, in the travel and tourism industry, lifting people out of poverty and into a livelihood that not just supports them, but, many people in their family. I think at one point we did research and said it one of those students getting a job benefits up to 8 family members. And then they in turn can get educated. And so I think that's certainly one of my favorite models, and I would love to see that replicated around the region. But many of and I have to credit that, a number of multinational companies are in discussions with me now because they're also interested in supporting that small business and micro business segment, and in terms of enabling them with digital tools or health and safety training, education around entrepreneurship. So I do think that there's a broadened interest in terms of, how can we make travel really enabling for local communities and economies.
I mean, that's one area that PATA does extremely well. Having, working with you as a knowledge partner and also as a member, Euromonitor has been involved with your innovation series of webinars, and it just seems so accessible that you open the platform and you invite people such as ourselves. And I was on a panel just the other week with Expedia, hotel beds, Simply Flying, and just so many different types of companies being brought together to share insights. I mean, obviously, innovation is at the crux of recovery, and I mean, how do how do you drive innovation in such a disparate and sort of fragmented market, as you say, with so many small, medium enterprises? It's really challenging. But uh, what sort of what's the approach at PATA for driving innovation?
Well, I would say that I've been passionate about innovation through my career. I started my career in pharma R&D actually, and I was very lucky as a young intern. I interned in Bell Laboratories, which was this kind of fabled place of amazing innovations. And so that, in a way, that carried that fascination carried through my career. And in the last few years, I worked with startups in entrepreneurship and innovation. So what I saw when I came to PATA was that, certainly I'm a believer that from crisis, that actually triggers the best type of innovation, because during crisis, the true needs are very sharpened, and there is an urgency in terms of finding solutions. And so one of the initiatives that I set up when I started, back in June, was an innovation hub, and you'll find it a travel innovation hub, which you'll find on the PATA website. And it was really, someone can, any one of our members or our staff can read about an interesting innovation, a solution, and just send us a link, send us an article, and we'll post it. And it's really meant for, and if you look on the site, you'll find an amazing array of different partnerships, um, different creative solutions, different marketing solutions, all, a whole array of them. And I think that, it's really meant to inspire and inform our network about that. And you mentioned also our webinars. I think that we've got, I look at PATA as a network of experts, and there's so much knowledge. And one, um, I'll say, responsibility or benefit that we have as PATA is to create a platform where we can share these best practices and have people exchange ideas. And it really is such an amazing cross section of the entire travel ecosystem that we can bring together in different ways, whether it's virtual or in person. And I think that's really when innovation happens, is when you've got different experts coming together and different experiences coming together and sharing ideas.
I mean, PATA is obviously a highly engaged organisation on all fronts. So whether it's with its members, whether it's with consumers or students or with governments, I mean, what else should we be looking forward to as you plan the year ahead?
Well, I'm really excited to finally be able to get back to physical events and bring people together. As travel, we're in the business of authentic in-market and in-person experiences. And so in the balance of the year, we did have to push them back, um, and have our events rescheduled for the second half of the year. But upcoming, we'll have in the end of October, October 25th to 27th, we'll have our first annual summit in 2.5 years. We'll have it in Ras Al Khaimah, which is located 45 minutes outside of Dubai. And it's also our first event in West Asia or Middle East. And it'll be exciting to bring everyone together. And it's a beautiful destination with beach and desert and mountain and a lovely property. And I'm very excited to be partnering with Rocky, the CEO of Rock TDA. He has made it his mission for Ras Al Khaimah to be the most sustainable destination in the UAE. And I have a number of uh, government members with that same ambition and dynamism, and they're very keen to really drive progress. And so I'm really happy as PATA to be able to support them in that mission and bring people together, so that we can all move forward in terms of whether it's destination resilience, sustainability, or what I'd love to ultimately be advocating is also for regenerative tourism more and more, and really defining what those terms mean, and enabling the industry to achieve that.
That's, I mean, I was in a conference. My first in person conference was last week at the Tourism Society of Scotland, and we were at Napier University, and we had Suzanne Becken beamed in from New Zealand, and she gave a fantastic presentation of the regenerative tourism model that they're embracing in New Zealand. And it just seems it's really great that it's sort of infused by indigenous knowledge, so Maori culture on the importance of well-being and nature and community, as well as the economic benefits. And so is that something that you as PATA are also going to be sort of advocating a new type of tourism based on regeneration?
Absolutely. I think it's really exciting. And I think the idea that, you can take a trip and be inspired and go back and, help that destination either become what it was once originally with restoration or, support the local communities. I think this can happen in a number of different contexts, either in, a big development project, um, or it can be done, working in a very green economy, a very nature-based economy. Um, I'm keen to see this happen, and I think it would inspire a lot of travelers as well.
And Liz, you mentioned that you're about to go on a big trip. So where exactly are you heading off to? And will you be undertaking any sort of, authentic nature-based tourism yourself?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. Well, my first priority is that I'm flying into Los Angeles for my son's university graduation. So I'm excited about that. And then it's going to be a multi-purpose trip. I'm speaking at AHLA in Chicago, for the first time, and I'll be visiting New York to meet with some business colleagues as well. And I'm pleased to say that I'll be joining the USTOA delegation in Norway for a small sustainability themed conference there. And I think that, there are a number of best practices in the Nordics that certainly Asia Pacific could benefit from. So, I look forward to connecting, the knowledge that exists between the West and the East. I think both parts of the world have opportunities to learn from each other and actually create best practices. Um, and so I'm excited. It'll be a bit of a long trip, but that's how travel goes these days.
Indeed. And I just like to say thank you for joining me today, and the just to wish you huge amounts of congratulations for your son's success. That's very exciting.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's been my honor.
Thank you. It really was a fascinating conversation today. So thank you for joining us. Join us next time for Travel Leaders Podcast. Thank you.